The rope burned through her wrists before the dust ever touched her face. Maggie Sullivan hit the ground hard, knees first, then palms, then the side of her jaw against sun-baked clay. Someone laughed. A woman's voice, high and pleased. The hands that shoved her forward didn't belong to men. They belonged to neighbors. To the baker's wife who once borrowed her sugar. To the schoolteacher who'd smiled at her in church. Walk, murderer. She couldn't, so they dragged her instead. Before we go further into Maggie's story, I need to ask you something. If this opening grabbed you, if you felt that rope burn, if you heard that laugh, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button right now, because this story gets darker before it gets lighter, and you're going to want to see how a woman everybody called cursed became the one person who could save them all. And drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to know how far Maggie's story travels. Now let's go back. Back to the day Ironwood Springs tried to kill her. The crowd had been gathering since dawn. Maggie knew because she'd heard them. Voices rising like floodwater outside the jail cell, seeping through the cracks in the wood, filling the small space, until she couldn't breathe anything but their hatred. Hang her. Burn her. Let her rot. Sheriff Dalton hadn't looked at her when he opened the cell. Wouldn't meet her eyes when he tied her wrists with rope that smelled like horses and old blood. His hands shook not from age, but from something worse. Shame, maybe. Or fear of what the town would do if he refused them. "I'm sorry, Maggie," he whispered. She didn't answer. Sorry didn't stop him from knotting the rope tight enough to cut off feeling in her fingers. The door swung open. Light poured in like a slap. Heat rolled off Main Street in waves, the kind of oppressive July heat that made men mean and women meaner. Maggie squinted against the glare, and the first thing she saw was Eleanor Hayes standing front and center, parasol tilted just so, mouth curved in satisfaction. "There she is," Eleanor announced loud enough for the whole street. "The woman who murdered her husband in cold blood." "I didn't," Maggie started. A rock hit her shoulder. Not large enough to break bone, but big enough to hurt. She stumbled. The crowd roared approval. "Liar!" someone shouted. "Poisoner! Witch!" Sheriff Dalton's grip tightened on her arm. "Don't fight," he muttered. "You'll only make it worse." Worse than what Maggie wanted to ask. Worse than being paraded through the streets like a prize hog. Worse than watching every person she'd ever known line up to watch her humiliation. But she knew the answer. Worse meant the gallows. Worse meant a rope around her neck instead of her wrists. So she walked, step after step down Main Street, past the Mercantile where she used to buy flour, past the church where she'd married Thomas Sullivan 3 years ago, past the saloon where Thomas had spent more time than he'd ever spent with her. The crowd followed. Grew. Swelled into something living and hungry. Maggie's legs trembled. Her worn boots, Thomas's old boots cut down to fit her because she'd sold her own shoes to pay his bar tab, scraped against the dirt. The blue dress she wore, the one she'd sewn herself from feed sacks because Thomas said she didn't deserve store-bought cloth, clung to her back with sweat. "Look at her," a woman called out. "Mrs. Henderson, who ran the boarding house. Fat as a Christmas goose and twice as useless." Laughter rippled through the crowd. "Couldn't even give Thomas a son," another voice added. "What good is a wife who can't bear children? Maybe that's why he drank himself to death," someone else suggested. "Who could stand being married to that?" The words landed like fists. Each one found a soft place, a wound already open. Maggie had heard them before, whispered behind hands, muttered when she passed, but never like this. Never so loud. Never so proud. Her foot caught on a rut in the road. She went down hard. The crowd cheered. Sheriff Dalton hauled her up by the rope. "Keep moving." "I can't," Maggie gasped. Her knees bled through the thin fabric of her dress. "Please, I can't. You should have thought of that before you killed him." "I didn't kill him." The words tore out of her raw and desperate. She twisted in the sheriff's grip, turning to face the crowd, to face all of them. Thomas drank poison from his own bottles. I tried to save him. I gave him medicine. Medicine. Reverend Isaiah Blackwood stepped forward from the crowd. His black coat flapped in the hot wind like vulture wings. His face, all hard angles and righteous fury, looked down at her with something worse than hatred. Pity. You gave him your medicine, Mrs. Sullivan. Your herbs, your potions. The same dark remedies that decent folk know better than to trust. They were just herbs. Chamomile and willow bark, nothing more. And when the doctor examined your husband's body, the Reverend continued, as if she hadn't spoken. What did he find? Poison in his blood. Poison that came from plants. Poison that you gave him. The poison came from whiskey, Maggie screamed. From years of drinking until his liver rotted. That's what killed him. But no one was listening. Eleanor Hayes stepped closer, her skirt swishing her pretty face arranged in mock sympathy. Poor delusional creature. She actually believes her own lies. I'm not lying. Of course you are. Eleanor's voice dropped sweet as honey and twice as thick. Everyone knows what you are, Maggie. A burden. A curse. Thomas told me himself, you know. Told me how you drove him to drink. How your barrenness... Don't. The word came out broken. Please don't. How your failure as a woman... Eleanor continued, relishing each word. Made him the laughingstock of every saloon from here to Cheyenne. He said being married to you was like being buried alive. Something inside Maggie cracked. Not broke, it had broken long ago, the first time Thomas raised his fist. The first time he stumbled home reeking of whiskey and other women. This was different. This was the sound of whatever had been holding her together finally giving up. She sagged against the rope. Let her weight fall. If they wanted to drag her, let them drag her. The sheriff cursed. Get up! She didn't. I said get up. Let her crawl, someone suggested. Let her crawl like the snake she is. And that's when they started dragging her. Maggie's knees scraped the ground. Rocks bit into her palms. Dust filled her mouth, her nose, her eyes. The crowd's voices became a roar. Words blending into one long howl of approval. She should fight, she thought distantly. Should kick and scream and make them work for it. But what was the point? They'd already decided. The trial had been 3 days of testimony about what a terrible wife she'd been, how Thomas had suffered, how the whole town had watched her drive a good man to his grave. The verdict, guilty of murder, had surprised exactly no one. This walk through town was just ceremony, entertainment, before the execution. The rope jerked her forward. She stumbled, fell again. Someone spat on her. Someone else threw something rotten that splattered against her back. Enough! A voice roared. The crowd went silent so fast, it felt like someone had dropped a curtain. Even the sheriff stopped walking. Maggie lifted her head, blinking through blood and dust and tears. She hadn't realized she was crying. A man stood in the middle of the street. Tall, lean, weathered like old leather. His hat cast shadows over a face that looked like it had forgotten how to smile. Dust covered his coat. A rifle hung easy from one hand. And beside him, pressing close against his legs, were 2 little girls in matching calico dresses, their dark braids already escaping their ribbons, their eyes wide and blue as summer sky. Jake Thornton, Sheriff Dalton said slowly. This ain't your concern. Jake didn't answer. He was looking at Maggie. Not at her torn dress or bleeding knees, at her face, into her eyes, like he could see past the dirt and humiliation to something underneath. One of the little girls, they were twins, Maggie realized, tugged on Jake's hand. Papa, she whispered loud enough for half the street to hear. Why is everyone being mean to that lady? Hush, Rose, Jake said, but his voice was gentle. But Papa, she looks like... I said hush. Reverend Blackwood stepped forward, hands clasped behind his back. As I said, Thornton, this is not your concern. This woman has been tried and convicted. She will hang at sunset. The law is the law. The law, Jake repeated. His voice was quiet, quiet in a way that made the crowd lean in to hear. "That what you call this, dragging a woman through the street while you all watch and cheer?" "She's a murderer," Eleanor said sharply. "Is she?" "The court said so." "The court?" Jake's lip curled. "The same court that's got Judge Morrison sitting on the bench. The judge who owed Thomas Sullivan money. The judge who made damn sure this trial was about everything except what actually happened." Shocked silence. Nobody questioned Judge Morrison. Nobody questioned the court. "You calling our justice system corrupt?" Reverend Blackwood's voice could have frozen hell. "I'm calling it convenient." Jake took a step forward. The crowd shifted uneasy now. Men who'd been shouting 5 minutes ago suddenly found their boots very interesting. Women who'd thrown rocks pulled their shawls tighter. Because Jake Thornton had a reputation. Everyone knew it. Gunfighter during the war. Killed 17 men at Shiloh. Could put a bullet through a silver dollar at 50 paces. And after his wife died birthing the twins, he'd become something harder than he'd been before. Colder. The kind of man you didn't push unless you were ready for him to push back. The second twin, the one who hadn't spoken, suddenly broke away from Jake's side. "Ruby, no!" Jake lunged for her, but she was already running a tiny tornado of calico and determination straight toward Maggie. The crowd gasped. Someone screamed. Ruby didn't stop. She dropped to her knees in the dust beside Maggie, her small hands reaching for the rope around Maggie's wrists. "You're hurt," Ruby said, her voice wobbling. "You're hurt, and they're being mean, and that's not fair." "Ruby, get back here," Jake barked. But Rose was already running too, her braids flying behind her. She slid to a stop on Maggie's other side, grabbing Maggie's bound hands. "Don't be scared," Rose said fiercely. "We won't let them hurt you anymore." Maggie stared at them. These children. These small, perfect children with their mother's eyes. She saw it now. Saw the ghost of Sarah Thornton in their faces, looking at her like she was worth protecting. "Girls," she whispered. "You shouldn't." "We should," Rose interrupted. "Mama said you should always help people who need help. And you need help." Ruby nodded hard enough to shake her braids loose. Then she looked up at her father standing frozen in the street and said the words that would change everything. "Papa, can she come home with us?" The crowd erupted. "Absolutely not. Those children shouldn't be anywhere near her. She'll corrupt them." But Jake wasn't listening to the crowd. He was looking at his daughters kneeling in the dirt beside a woman everyone said was a murderer. Their faces full of the kind of simple, uncomplicated compassion that adults spend years learning to ignore. Rose turned her face up to him. "Please, Papa. She needs somewhere safe. And we—" Her voice dropped to a whisper, but in the silence everyone heard it anyway. "We need a mama." Every woman in the crowd sucked in a breath. It was one thing to discuss Jake Thornton's loss in hushed tones over tea. It was another thing entirely to hear his daughter say it out loud, raw and honest and heartbreaking. Jake's jaw worked. Maggie could see the war happening behind his eyes, could see him fighting between what was smart and what was right. Finally, he stepped forward. Sheriff Dalton moved to block him. "Don't, Jake." "Get out of my way, Bill." "I can't do that." "Sure you can." Jake's hand drifted to his hip, not threatening, just resting near his gun belt. "You just step aside. She's been convicted. She's a danger. She's a woman half dead from being dragged through town by people who should know better." Jake's voice hardened. "Now move, or I'll move you." For a long moment, nobody breathed. Then Sheriff Dalton's shoulders sagged. He stepped aside. Jake walked forward, knelt in the dust beside Maggie, drew a knife from his belt. The crowd tensed and cut the ropes from her wrists. The bonds fell away. Maggie gasped as blood rushed back into her hands, bringing pain sharp enough to make spots dance across her vision. "Can you stand?" Jake asked. Could she? Maggie wasn't sure. Her legs felt like they belonged to someone else. Her entire body was one massive bruise. But Jake was offering his hand. And his daughters were watching her with hope written all over their faces. And the whole town was holding its breath, waiting to see what she would do. So Maggie gritted her teeth, grabbed Jake's hand, and pulled herself to her feet. The world tilted. Her knees buckled. Jake caught her one arm around her waist, holding her steady against his side. "I got you," he said quietly. And for the first time in 3 years since she'd married Thomas Sullivan and learned exactly how cruel a man could be, Maggie believed someone might actually mean those words. "This is outrageous." Reverend Blackwood's face had gone purple. "You're interfering with..." "With what?" Jake cut him off. "With your entertainment. That what this is, Reverend. Your version of a circus. With justice. Justice." Jake looked at the crowd, at all the faces twisted with righteousness and barely concealed bloodlust. "Tell me something, Reverend. How many of you were at Thomas Sullivan's funeral?" He didn't wait for an answer. "All of you near enough. And how many of you told me what a good man Thomas was, how he'd be missed?" Uneasy shuffling. "Now tell me how many of you knew he beat his wife?" Silence, thick and damning. "How many of you saw the bruises and said nothing? Heard her crying through the walls at night and turned up your music? Watched him stagger out of the saloon every night drinking away his wages while she wore feed sacks because she couldn't afford real dresses?" Eleanor's voice was ice. "That has nothing to do with... It has everything to do with it." Jake's shout echoed off the buildings. "You all stood by while he destroyed her piece by piece, day by day. And when he finally drank himself into the grave, which anyone with eyes could see coming a mile away, you decided it was easier to blame her than admit you did nothing. He was a good man before he married her." Someone protested weakly. "No." The voice was soft, came from the back of the crowd. "No, he wasn't." Heads turned. A woman pushed forward. Small mouse-brown hair, a face that looked like it apologized for existing. Martha Yates, who ran the boarding house with her husband. "Mrs. Yates." Reverend Blackwood's voice held a warning. "What are you—" "I saw them," Martha said, and her voice was stronger now. "I saw Thomas Sullivan hit his wife, more than once. I saw him grab her by the hair and drag her into their room. I heard..." She swallowed hard. "I heard things no woman should have to endure." "Why didn't you say something?" Jake demanded. Martha's eyes filled with tears. "Because I was scared. Because my husband said it wasn't our business. Because everyone said Thomas was such a good man. And if I spoke up, maybe they'd start looking at my husband the same way, start asking questions I didn't want to answer." She looked at Maggie, and there was so much regret in her face it hurt to see. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I should have helped you." Maggie couldn't speak. Her throat had closed up entirely. "Anyone else?" Jake looked around the crowd. "Anyone else see something they didn't report? Anyone else know the truth and keep quiet?" More silence. But this time, it was different. Ashamed. Doc Porter cleared his throat from the side of the street. "I treated him once, year ago. He came in with a broken hand, said he'd hit a wall." The old doctor's mouth twisted. "I knew better. Knew what kind of wall leaves bruises shaped like a jaw. But I didn't ask questions." "This is ridiculous," Eleanor said, but her voice had lost some of its certainty. "Even if Thomas was difficult, that doesn't change the fact that she poisoned him. The doctor's report said his liver was destroyed." Doc Porter interrupted. "Said he had enough alcohol in his blood to pickle a horse. Said the poison I found was the same compounds you get from years of drink." He looked at Maggie. "Said he probably had another year at most the way he was going. Said if someone gave him medicine trying to help, it wouldn't have made a lick of difference. He was already dying." The crowd was unraveling now. Maggie could feel it, could see people glancing at each other, uncertain. "But the trial," someone started, "was a mockery," Jake finished. "Judge Morrison owed Thomas $300 from a poker game. Everyone knows it. This whole thing was about making sure nobody looked too close at what really happened. Because if you did, you'd have to admit that you all killed Thomas Sullivan just as much as the whiskey did. You killed him by doing nothing." Rose and Ruby had wrapped themselves around Maggie's legs, their small bodies warm and solid and real. She looked down at them, these children who barely knew her, who'd still run to her aid without hesitation. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you help me?" Rose looked up, her blue eyes serious. "Because you look sad. Like Mama looked right before she died." Ruby nodded. "And Papa's sad too. Maybe if you're together you can be less sad." It was such simple child logic. Such pure, uncomplicated kindness. Maggie felt something crack open in her chest, some locked room she'd boarded shut after Thomas's first beating. "I can't," she started. "You can," Jake said. He wasn't looking at her. He was facing the crowd, his body angled between them and Maggie like a shield. "Question is, are they gonna let you?" Reverend Blackwood drew himself up. This woman was convicted in a court of law. If you harbor her, Thornton, you're breaking the law yourself. Then arrest me too. Don't be a fool. I'm being a man, Jake shot back. Something precious few of you can claim today. Now here's what's going to happen. I'm taking Maggie Sullivan back to my ranch. She's going to work for me. Help with the girls, help with the house, help with whatever needs doing. And if any of you have a problem with that..." He let the sentence hang, let them fill in the implications themselves. Nobody moved. "Thought so." Jake turned to the sheriff. "Bill, you gonna try and stop me?" Sheriff Dalton looked at his boots. "I don't see nothing happening here except a man offering employment to someone who needs it." "The court," Reverend Blackwood began. "The court," Sheriff Dalton interrupted tiredly, "can take it up with Judge Morrison when he gets back from Cheyenne next month. Until then, far as I'm concerned, Maggie Sullivan is free to go." Eleanor made a sound like a furious cat. "This is unacceptable. That woman is dangerous. She'll corrupt those poor motherless children, and when they turn up dead..." "If anything happens to my girls," Jake said softly, "I'll know exactly where to look. Won't I, Eleanor?" Eleanor's mouth snapped shut. Her face went white. "That's what I thought." Jake shifted his grip on Maggie. "Come on, let's get you out of here." "I can walk," Maggie said, but her voice shook. "I know you can, but you don't have to." He lifted her, just scooped her up like she weighed nothing, like her solid frame, and years of her own shame weren't heavy at all, and started walking toward a wagon parked at the end of the street. The crowd parted before them. Silent now. Watching. Rose and Ruby ran ahead, scrambling into the wagon bed, chattering excitedly about their new friend. Maggie heard them over the ringing in her ears, their voices high and bright and impossibly hopeful. Jake set her gently on the wagon seat. "You all right?" Was she? Maggie wasn't sure what all right even meant anymore. She'd been convicted of murder, dragged through the streets, sentenced to hang. And now she was sitting in a stranger's wagon while his daughters chattered behind her, and the town she'd lived in for 3 years watched in stunned silence. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why are you doing this?" Jake pulled himself up beside her, took the reins. "Because someone should have done it a long time ago." He clicked to the horses. The wagon lurched forward. As they rolled down Main Street, Maggie looked back one last time at Ironwood Springs. At the crowd still frozen in place. At the gallows waiting at the end of the street, noose swaying in the wind. At the life that had been ready to end her. Rose's small hand slipped into hers. "Don't look back," the little girl said wisely. "Mama said you should always look forward. That's where the good things are." Maggie squeezed her hand. Let herself look forward toward the horizon, stretching wide and open before them. And for the first time since Thomas Sullivan had put a ring on her finger and a fist in her face, she let herself hope that maybe, just maybe, Rose was right. The ranch appeared on the horizon like a promise half-kept. Weathered wood paint stripped by too many seasons, a porch that sagged on one side. Not grand, not even particularly welcoming, but standing. Still standing after whatever storms had tried to take it down. Maggie gripped the wagon seat as they rolled closer, her knuckles white. Behind her, Rose and Ruby had finally quieted their excited chatter, fading into drowsy murmurs. The adrenaline that had carried her through the last hour was draining away, leaving nothing but pain and a bone-deep exhaustion that made her whole body shake. Jake hadn't spoken since they left town. Just drove his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on the road. Once about a mile out, he'd glanced at her, opened his mouth like he might say something, then closed it again and looked away. Maggie didn't blame him. What was there to say? Thank you for saving my life. Sorry for bringing trouble to your door. Why did you do something so monumentally stupid as to cross the whole town for a woman you don't even know? The wagon hit a rut. Maggie's ribs screamed. She couldn't stop the small sound that escaped her throat. Jake's hand shot out, steadying her. Almost there. His palm was warm against her arm, calloused, solid. Maggie pulled away like she'd been burned. Jake's hand dropped back to the reins. Sorry. No, Maggie swallowed. I'm not used to. I didn't mean. It's all right. But it wasn't all right. Nothing was all right. Maggie could feel hysteria bubbling up in her chest, hot and chaotic. She was sitting in a stranger's wagon fleeing a murder conviction with two little girls who'd decided she should be their mother, and a man who'd just made himself an enemy of his entire town. For her. For someone he didn't know. Someone everyone said was a murderer. Why? The word came out broken. Why did you do that? Jake was quiet for so long Maggie thought he wouldn't answer. Then, my Sarah died 2 years ago, come September. Maggie went still. Died birthing the girls. Bled out before Doc Porter could stop it. And you know what the town said? They said it was God's will. Said she was called home. Said I should be grateful for the daughters she left me and trust in the Lord's plan. His voice was flat. Dead. Not one of them said what I knew they were thinking. That if I'd been a better husband, a richer man, I could have afforded a real doctor from Cheyenne. That if I'd done more, been more, Sarah might have lived. That's not fair. Jake's laugh was bitter. No, it's not. But that's what people do, isn't it? When something bad happens, they need someone to blame. And it's always easier to blame the person closest to the hurt than to admit sometimes terrible things just happen. The ranch was closer now. Maggie could see chickens scratching in the yard, a barn that leaned slightly to the left, laundry hanging limp on a line. When I saw you in that street, Jake continued, saw them dragging you like an animal while they all watched and smiled. I saw Sarah. Saw what would have happened to her if she'd lived and I'd died instead. Because that's how this town works. They need someone to punish. Someone to make small so they can feel big. He pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house. I didn't save you because I think you're innocent. I don't know if you are or not, and frankly, I don't much care. I saved you because what they were doing was wrong. And I'm tired. I'm so damn tired of watching wrong things happen and doing nothing. Rose stirred in the wagon bed. Papa, are we home? Jake's face softened instantly. Yeah, honey, we're home. Ruby sat up, rubbing her eyes, saw Maggie, smiled like the sun coming up. You came with us. Maggie's throat closed. I did. Come on. Rose grabbed Ruby's hand and they scrambled out of the wagon with the boneless grace of children. We'll show you Mama's room. Papa hasn't let anyone in there since she died, but you can use it. Can't she, Papa? Jake climbed down, came around to Maggie's side, offered his hand again. Can you walk? Maggie looked at his hand, at his face, at this man who'd just upended his whole life for a principle. She took his hand. Her legs nearly buckled when her feet hit the ground. Jake caught her waist, held her steady. For a moment they stood there close enough that Maggie could smell dust and leather and something else. Soap maybe, something clean. Easy, Jake said. Maggie pulled away, forced herself to stand without help. I'm fine. You're hurt. I've been hurt before. Something flickered across Jake's face. Understanding, maybe, or recognition. He nodded once, stepped back, gave her space. Rose grabbed Maggie's hand. Come on. The house is small, but it's nice. Papa keeps it real clean. He says Mama would haunt him if he let it get messy. Ruby took Maggie's other hand. Do you believe in ghosts? Maggie looked down at these two small faces, so earnest, so hopeful. I don't know. Mama's not a ghost, Rose said confidently. She's in heaven. But sometimes I think maybe she can still see us. Papa says she can. He talks to her sometimes when he thinks we're asleep. Rose, Jake said quietly. That's enough. But that's enough. Rose ducked her head, but didn't let go of Maggie's hand. Together, the three of them climbed the porch steps. The wood groaned under their weight. Jake moved ahead to open the door. The inside was dim and cool. Maggie's eyes took a moment to adjust. When they did, she saw exactly what Jake had described. Clean. Orderly. A front room with a stone fireplace, a table with 4 chairs, a braided rug worn thin in the center. Through a doorway, she could see a kitchen. Dishes stacked neat on shelves. A cast-iron stove. Everything in its place. Everything perfect. Everything empty. Girls go wash up for supper, Jake said. But we want to show Maggie. Now, please. Something in his tone made them obey without further argument. They disappeared down a hallway, whispering to each other. Jake turned to Maggie. Rooms this way. He led her down the same hallway past a door where she could hear the twins splashing water and giggling to a door at the very end. Jake's hand hesitated on the knob. Haven't opened this in 2 years, he said. Couldn't. Every time I tried it felt like... He stopped, shook his head. Girls are right though. You need somewhere to sleep, and this is the only other bedroom. He pushed the door open. The room was frozen in time. A bed with a wedding ring quilt. A washstand with a pitcher and basin. A wardrobe doors closed. A rocking chair by the window, a basket of mending still beside it. Dust covered everything like snow. Maggie stepped inside. The floorboards creaked. Somewhere in the house, the twins laughed. I'll bring water, Jake said, for washin', and I'll see if any of Sarah's dresses might fit you. She was... He stopped, started again. She wasn't as tall as you, but she was sturdy. Her things might work. You don't have to. Yes, I do. Jake met her eyes. You can't wear that. He gestured to her torn, filthy dress. And I'm guessing you don't have anything else. Maggie looked down. The feed sack dress was destroyed. Ripped at the seams, stained with blood and dirt, and things she didn't want to think about. She'd worn it for 3 days in that cell. Had worn it when they dragged her through the street. No, she whispered. I don't have anything else. Jake nodded. I'll be back. He left, pulling the door closed behind him. Maggie stood in the center of the dead woman's room and tried to remember how to breathe. This was temporary, she told herself. Had to be. Jake had saved her from hanging, but that didn't mean she belonged here. Didn't mean his daughter's sweet insistence that she could be their mother was anything more than childish fantasy. Didn't mean the town would ever let her truly escape. She moved to the washstand, touched the pitcher. It was delicate white porcelain with blue flowers painted around the rim. The kind of thing a man bought for his wife because he loved her, because he wanted her to have beautiful things. Thomas had never bought her anything beautiful. The door opened. Jake carried a bucket of water in one hand and a bundle of cloth in the other. He set the bucket by the washstand, poured water into the basin. Steam rose. He'd heated it for her. Dresses are on the bed, he said without looking at her. Take what fits. Sarah would want... His voice caught. She'd want them used. Mr. Thornton. Jake. Jake. Maggie wrapped her arms around herself. I can't stay here. Where else you gonna go? I don't know. Somewhere. Anywhere. But I can't. I won't bring trouble to your family. Trouble's already here. Jake turned to face her fully. You think the town's gonna forget what happened today? You think they're gonna let this go? Eleanor Hayes has been angling to be the next Mrs. Thornton since before Sarah was cold in the ground. Reverend Blackwood doesn't like being challenged, and Judge Morrison's gonna be madder than a wet hen when he gets back and finds out his verdict got overturned by a cowboy with a conscience. He crossed his arms. We're all in this now. Question is whether we face it together or you run and they hunt you down anyway. Maggie's hands shook. They'll come for me. Probably. They'll hurt you, hurt your daughters. They'll try. Jake's hand drifted to his gun belt. I didn't survive Shiloh by being easy to kill. This isn't war. Isn't it? Jake's eyes were hard. Seems to me we're all fighting something. You're fighting for your life. I'm fighting to keep my girls safe. Town's fighting to keep things the way they've always been. He moved to the door, paused. Only difference between this and war is nobody's honest about what we're doing. At least in battle, men admit they're trying to kill each other. He left before Maggie could respond. She stood alone in the silent room, water steaming gently in the basin-clean dresses, waiting on the bed. Through the walls, she could hear the twins' voices, high and happy. Could hear Jake moving around in the kitchen, the clatter of pots and pans. Normal sounds. Home sounds. Maggie hadn't heard sounds like that in 3 years. She moved to the basin, dipped her hands in the water hot enough to sting, clean enough to shame her. She scrubbed at her face, her arms, her neck. The water turned brown with dirt and blood. She scrubbed harder, trying to scour away more than just grime. Trying to scrub away the feeling of hands shoving her down of rope, cutting her wrists of the crowd's hatred, pressing against her skin like a physical weight. But some stains went deeper than water could reach. When she was as clean as she could get without a full bath, Maggie turned to the dresses. 3 of them laid out neat. A brown work dress with practical buttons. A blue Sunday dress with lace at the collar. A green dress, simple but pretty, with flowers embroidered on the cuffs. Maggie touched the green one. The fabric was soft, well made. Sarah Thornton had been loved, had been cherished, had worn dresses that showed it. She chose the brown one, practical, unassuming, a dress for work, not for dreaming. It fit mostly. Tight across the shoulders, loose at the waist. Sarah had been smaller but sturdy, like Jake said. Maggie could work in this, could move. Could pretend maybe that she was the kind of woman who belonged in a house like this. Someone knocked. Maggie. Rose's voice tentative. Papa says supper's ready. Are you hungry? Was she? Maggie couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten. The jail had given her water and stale bread. Before that, she couldn't say. Days blurred together when you were waiting to die. She opened the door. Rose and Ruby stood in the hallway, faces scrubbed, pink hair still damp. They looked at her in the brown dress and smiled identical smiles. You look pretty, Ruby said. Like Mama, Rose added. Not exactly, but nice. You look nice. Maggie's eyes burned. Thank you. They led her to the kitchen. Jake stood at the stove dishing stew into bowls. He glanced up when they entered, and something crossed his face when he saw her in Sarah's dress. Pain, maybe, or memory. But he didn't comment, just gestured to the table. Sit. It's not fancy, but it's hot. Maggie sat. The twins scrambled into chairs on either side of her, grinning like they'd won a prize. Jake brought the bowls set one in front of each of them. The stew smelled like heaven beef and carrots and potatoes thick and rich. Papa makes the best stew, Rose announced. Mama taught him. She said a man should know how to feed himself and his family. Your mama was a smart woman, Maggie said softly. Jake sat at the head of the table, bowed his head. The twins did the same. Maggie followed uncertain. Lord, Jake said, we thank you for this food, for this day, for the strength to do what's right, even when it's hard. We ask that You watch over this family and those who've joined it. Keep us safe. Keep us strong. Amen." "Amen," the twins chorused. Maggie's throat was too tight to speak. They ate. The twins chattered about their day, about the wagon ride, about showing Maggie the barn tomorrow, and introducing her to the chickens. Jake listened, interjecting occasionally, but mostly just watched. His eyes kept drifting to Maggie, then away like he was trying to figure out a puzzle that didn't quite fit together. Maggie ate slowly. The stew was good. Better than good. But her stomach was a knot of anxiety, and every bite felt like swallowing stones. "Why don't you like it?" Ruby asked suddenly. Maggie startled. "What? You're eating like it hurts. Don't you like Papa's cooking?" "Ruby, that's rude," Jake said. "But It's wonderful," Maggie interrupted. "The stew is wonderful. I'm just tired. It's been a long day." Ruby studied her with those two knowing blue eyes. "Mama used to eat like that. When she was sad. Papa said it was because sadness makes you forget what happy tastes like." The kitchen went quiet. Jake pushed back from the table. "Girls, finish your supper and get ready for bed." "But now." They obeyed, but slowly, reluctantly. When they disappeared down the hallway, Jake turned to Maggie. "I'm sorry. They don't understand." "No." Maggie set down her spoon. "They understand perfectly. They understand better than anyone." She looked at Jake. "Your daughter's right. I did forget what happy tastes like. Forgot so long ago I can't even remember if I ever knew." Jake was quiet for a moment. Then, "Thomas Sullivan beat you." It wasn't a question. Maggie didn't treat it like one. "Yes." "How long?" "From the beginning. He was drunk on our wedding night. Hit me for the first time 3 hours after we said our vows. Said I was too eager. Said decent women didn't—" She stopped, shook her head. "It doesn't matter what he said. He found reasons. There were always reasons." "Did you try to leave? Where would I go?" Maggie's laugh was hollow. "I had no family, no money. The town loved Thomas. He was charming when he wanted to be, generous. Everyone thought he was wonderful. And I was just me. Too big, too plain, too barren. If I'd left, where would I have gone? What would I have done? He made sure I had nothing. No friends, no allies. Nothing but him." Jake's hands curled into fists on the table. "Someone should have helped you." "Why?" "No one helped your Sarah either." The words came out harsher than Maggie intended. Jake flinched like she'd slapped him. "That's different," he said. "Is it? You said it yourself. You couldn't afford a better doctor. The town said it was God's will. They blamed you for not being more, doing more. How is that different from them blaming me for not being the wife Thomas wanted?" Jake stood abruptly, walked to the window, stood with his back to her shoulders, rigid. "I'm sorry," Maggie said. "I shouldn't have—" "No." Jake's voice was rough. "You're right. It's not different. I spent 2 years telling myself I could have saved her if I'd just been better, worked harder, earned more. And you spent 3 years thinking you could have fixed Thomas if you'd just been, prettier, more obedient, able to give him sons." "Yes," Maggie whispered. Jake turned. His eyes were fierce. "We were both wrong. Sarah died because birthing is dangerous and doctors are human, and sometimes people die. You were abused because Thomas Sullivan was a cruel bastard who enjoyed hurting someone smaller than him. None of it was our fault." "Then why does it feel like it was?" "Because that's what guilt does. It lies. Makes you believe you deserved what happened. Makes you think if you'd just been different, better, more, everything would have been fine." He moved back to the table, sat. "But we didn't deserve it, and we can't change what happened. All we can do is decide what comes next." Maggie stared at him. This man she'd known for all of 3 hours. this stranger who saw her more clearly than anyone had in years. "What comes next?" she asked. "You stay here. You help with the girls with the house with the ranch. You work. You earn your keep. And if the town has a problem with it, they can bring it to me. And when Judge Morrison gets back, when he comes to finish what was started." Jake's smile was cold. "Then we'll have a conversation about the law and justice and the difference between the two." Footsteps pattered down the hallway. Rose appeared in her nightgown, Ruby right behind her. "Papa, can Maggie tuck us in?" Jake looked at Maggie, raised an eyebrow. "That all right with you?" Was it Maggie had never tucked children into bed? Had never been trusted with something so precious? The thought terrified her. "Yes," she heard herself say. "I'd be honored." The twins cheered, grabbed her hands, pulled her down the hallway to their room. It was small, but cozy. 2 beds pushed against opposite walls, a shared dresser, a window overlooking the yard. Dolls sat on the beds, rag dolls hand-stitched, loved to the point of threadbare. Rose climbed into her bed, Ruby into hers. They looked at Maggie expectantly. I'm not sure what to do," Maggie admitted. "Mama used to sing," Ruby said, "but Papa can't carry a tune in a bucket." "I heard that," Jake called from the kitchen. The twins giggled. Maggie sat on the edge of Rose's bed. "I'm not sure I remember any songs." "Then tell us a story," Rose suggested, "about something happy." Something happy. Maggie searched her memory for anything that might qualify. Her childhood was a blur of hard work and harder winters. Her marriage was nightmare. What did she have that was happy? "My mother," she said slowly, "used to make bread. Every Sunday. The house would smell like yeast and warmth, and she'd let me punch down the dough. I'd pretend I was fighting giants." She smiled at the memory. She'd say, "Maggie girl, you're gonna make bread tough as boot leather if you keep punching it like that." But she always let me do it anyway. "Did your mama die?" Ruby asked. "Ruby," Rose hissed. "It's all right." Maggie touched Ruby's hair soft as silk. "Yes, she died. I was 12. Fever took her." "That's sad," Ruby said. "It is, but the memory's happy. The smell of bread, the warmth, the feeling of being loved." Maggie looked at both girls. "That's what you hold on to. Not the sadness of losing someone, but the joy of having known them." Rose yawned. "I miss Mama." "I know, sweetheart. Do you think she'd like you?" The question caught Maggie off guard. I don't know." "I think she would," Rose said drowsily. "Papa says Mama had a good heart, that she liked helping people. You need help, so I think she'd like you." Ruby was already asleep, thumb in her mouth, doll clutched to her chest. Rose's eyes were drifting closed. "Good night," Maggie whispered. "Night, Maggie." Rose mumbled, "Love you." The words hit Maggie like a physical blow. "Love you," casual as breathing, offered without hesitation to a woman these children had known for hours. She stood, walked to the door, stopped. "Love you." When was the last time someone had said those words to her? Her mother, maybe. Before the fever, before everything. Maggie pulled the door closed and found Jake standing in the hallway. "They settled?" he asked. "Yes, they're wonderful children." "They are." Jake looked past her at the closed door. "Sarah would have loved them so much. She wanted babies more than anything. And then she got them and—" He stopped, cleared his throat. "I'm glad they have someone kind to be around, even if it's just for a while." "Just for a while," Maggie echoed. But neither of them sounded like they believed it. Maggie woke to the sound of roosters and the smell of coffee. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. The bed was too soft, the air too clean. Then, Memory crashed back, dragging the rescued Jake Thornton's fierce eyes and his daughter's innocent trust. She sat up too fast. Her ribs screamed protest. Every muscle in her body had stiffened overnight, bruises blooming purple and black across her skin. Moving felt like being torn apart, but she moved anyway. The house was quiet. Dawn light filtered through the curtain, painting everything gold. Maggie dressed in the brown work dress again, braided her hair with shaking fingers, and made her way to the kitchen. Jake stood at the stove, his back to her. He'd already made coffee, already started breakfast. The twins were still asleep. "You should have stayed in bed," he said without turning. "How did you know I was here?" Floorboards creak. He poured coffee into a tin cup, held it out to her. "You're hurt. You need rest." "I need to work." Maggie took the coffee. It was strong enough to strip paint. Perfect. "You took me in. I owe you." "You don't owe me anything." "Yes, I do." Maggie sipped the coffee, felt it burn all the way down. "You saved my life. The least I can do is earn my keep." Jake turned to face her. His eyes were shadowed. He hadn't slept much either by the look of him. "Maggie, you were nearly killed yesterday. You're allowed to take a day to recover." "And do what?" "Sit in a dead woman's room and think about how I'm still alive when I shouldn't be. How your town wants me dead, and you've painted a target on your family by helping me." She set the cup down harder than she meant to. "I can't sit still. I'll go crazy. Please, let me work." Jake studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, but nothing heavy. No lifting, no hauling. You tear something open, Doc Porter's the only doctor for 50 miles, and I guarantee he won't come running to help you." "What needs doing?" "Everything." Jake's smile was tired. "Ranch doesn't run itself, but we'll start small. Girls need breakfast. Chickens need feeding. Gardens got weeds that won't pull themselves." "I can do that." "I know you can. Question is whether you should." "I should," Maggie said firmly. "I will." They worked in silence, moving around each other in the small kitchen. Jake fried eggs and bacon, while Maggie sliced bread, careful with the knife, careful with everything. Her hands still shook, probably would for a while. The twins tumbled into the kitchen just as breakfast hit the table, their hair wild, their nightgowns twisted. They saw Maggie and their faces lit up like Christmas. "You're still here." Rose threw her arms around Maggie's waist. Pain exploded through Maggie's ribs. She couldn't stop the gasp. Rose jerked back. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry I forgot you were hurt." "It's all right." Maggie forced a smile. "Just tender, that's all." "Rose, gentle," Jake warned. "Maggie's got bruises that need time." Ruby approached more carefully, touched Maggie's hand instead of hugging. "Does it hurt very bad?" "I've had worse," Maggie said, which was true, but probably not something she should have admitted to children. Jake's eyes darkened. He turned back to the stove without comment. They ate breakfast together, the twins chattering about their plans for the day. They wanted to show Maggie the barn, introduce her to the horses, take her to the creek where the best frogs lived. Their enthusiasm was infectious and exhausting in equal measure. After breakfast, Jake headed out to check the fences. The twins dragged Maggie outside to meet the chickens. The birds scattered when they approached, clucking indignantly. Rose threw feed while Ruby narrated the personality of each hen. "That's Matilda. She's mean. That's Bonnie, she's nice but stupid. That's Clementine, she's the best layer. Papa says she's worth her weight in gold." Maggie watched them, these small girls who'd grown up without a mother, who still found joy in chickens and sunshine. How did they do it? How did they wake up every day and choose happiness, when loss should have broken them? "Your papa takes good care of you," Maggie said. "He tries." Rose scattered the last of the feed. "But he's sad a lot. He thinks we don't notice, but we do. He misses your mama. We all do." Ruby leaned against Maggie's leg. "But Mama wouldn't want us to be sad forever. She'd want us to keep living. That's what Papa says." Your papa's a smart man. He's lonely too, Rose added. Mrs. Hayes brings him pies sometimes. She wears her fancy dresses and talks real sweet. But Papa doesn't like her. We can tell. Rose, that's not. It's true, he makes his polite face when she comes. The face he makes when he doesn't want to be rude, but wishes someone would go away. Maggie bit back a smile. You shouldn't gossip about your father. It's not gossip if it's true, Rose said matter-of-factly. Besides, we like you better than Mrs. Hayes. You don't wear perfume that makes us sneeze. They spent the morning working. Maggie pulled weeds from the garden while the twins helped by collecting rocks and making elaborate fairy houses. Her back ached, her hands blistered. But it felt good, felt purposeful, felt like maybe she had a reason to be alive. Around noon, a rider appeared on the horizon. The twins saw him first. Rose's happy chatter cut off mid-sentence. Ruby grabbed Maggie's hand, suddenly quiet. What's wrong? Maggie asked. That's Sheriff Dalton's horse, Rose whispered. Maggie's stomach dropped. She stood positioning herself between the twins and the approaching rider. Go get your father. But, now, please. They ran. Maggie stayed in the garden dirt under her nails, fear in her throat, watching Sheriff Dalton ride closer. He dismounted slowly like a man approaching a spooked horse, held up his hands to show they were empty. Mrs. Sullivan? It's Miss Sullivan, Maggie corrected. My husband's dead, remember? Or did the town forget while they were deciding how to kill me? Dalton's face tightened. I'm not here to cause trouble. Then why are you here? To warn you. He glanced toward the house. Town stirred up. Eleanor Hayes has been making the rounds telling anyone who'll listen that you've bewitched Jake Thornton, that you're dangerous. Reverend Blackwood's preaching about corruption and the devil's influence. Of course he is. Judge Morrison gets back in 3 days. When he does, he's gonna demand Jake turn you over. And if Jake refuses... Dalton shook his head. I can't protect you, not against the whole town. Nobody asked you to protect me, Jake's voice cut in. He strode across the yard, rifle in one hand, fury in his eyes. In fact, seems to me you were perfectly happy to let the town tear her apart yesterday. I was following the law. You were following cowardice. Jake stopped beside Maggie, close, like a wall. Now get off my property. Jake, be reasonable. 3 seconds before I stop being reasonable. 1. Dalton's hand drifted toward his gun. You're making a mistake. 2. Damn it, Jake, I'm trying to help. 3. The rifle came up, not pointed at Dalton, but the threat was clear. Sheriff or not, badge or not, Jake would shoot if pushed. Dalton backed toward his horse. You're gonna get yourself killed, Thornton. You and those girls. Is she really worth that? Get out. Dalton mounted. On your head then. When Morrison comes, when the town comes, don't say I didn't warn you. He rode off fast, dust trailing behind him. Jake didn't lower the rifle until he disappeared over the ridge. Papa. Rose's voice was small. She and Ruby stood on the porch holding hands, eyes wide. Jake's shoulders sagged. He set the rifle down. It's all right, girls. Just the sheriff being nosy. Is Maggie going to leave? Ruby asked. No. Is the town going to hurt her? Jake looked at Maggie. Something passed between them. An understanding. An acknowledgement that the reckoning was coming, ready or not. Not if I can help it, Jake said. But they all heard what he didn't say. Not if, when. That night, after the twins were asleep, Maggie found Jake on the porch. He sat in a rocking chair that creaked with each movement, cleaning his rifle, his movements methodical and practiced. I should go, Maggie said. Jake didn't look up. We've had this conversation. That was before the sheriff came. Before you knew, I knew exactly what I was getting into when I cut those ropes. He set the rifle aside, finally met her eyes. You think I'm stupid? You think I didn't know there'd be consequences? I think you're a good man who made an impulsive decision. It wasn't impulsive. Jake stood, walked to the porch railing. I've been watching this town for 2 years. Watching them smile and nod and play Christian while they tear each other apart behind closed doors. Watching them preach about mercy while they practice cruelty. Yesterday, when I saw you in that street, I had a choice. Be like them or be better. I chose better. And now your daughters are at risk. My daughters are learning that doing the right thing matters more than doing the easy thing. He turned to face her. You want to know what Sarah would say if she were here? She'd say the same thing she always said when I worried about money or drought, or whether I was good enough. She'd say, Jake Thornton, you can't control what the world throws at you. You can only control who you are when it hits. Maggie's eyes burned. She sounds like she was extraordinary. She was. Jake's voice softened. And she would have liked you. Would have fought for you same as I am. That's who she was. Who she taught me to be. I'm not worth fighting for. Yes, you are. Jake stepped closer. You survived 3 years with a man who beat you. Survived a murder trial you never should have faced. Survived being dragged through the streets while an entire town cheered. You're still standing, still fighting. If that's not worth protecting, I don't know what is. Maggie couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. No one had ever, not once in her entire life, told her she was worth protecting. I'm scared, she whispered. So am I. What are we going to do? Jake picked up his rifle again. We're gonna do what people like us always do. We're gonna get up tomorrow. We're gonna work. We're gonna take care of those girls. And when trouble comes, because it will come, we're gonna face it. Together. Together. The word hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning neither was quite ready to name. Maggie nodded. Together. The next 2 days passed in a strange kind of peace. Maggie worked from dawn until dusk, pushing her body past pain into a kind of numb functionality. She cooked meals that the twins devoured with enthusiasm. She mended clothes, swept floors, hauled water from the well, despite Jake's protests. She taught Rose and Ruby how to make bread, let them punch down the dough, laughed when flour exploded across the kitchen. She pretended she wasn't counting down the hours until Judge Morrison returned. Jake worked the ranch, fixed fences, tended animals, but Maggie noticed he never went far. Never let the house out of his sight for long. The rifle was always within reach. On the third day, Martha Yates appeared at the door. Maggie answered the knock, tea towel still in her hands, and froze when she saw who it was. Martha looked smaller than she had at the dragging, hunched, ashamed. Mrs. Sullivan, Miss Sullivan, may I come in? Why? Please, I have something to tell you. Something important. Maggie didn't move. Last I checked, you stood and watched while they dragged me through town. Didn't see you speaking up then. I know, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But I'm here now and I'm trying to... Martha's voice broke. Please, just 5 minutes. Jake appeared behind Maggie. It's all right, let her in. Maggie stepped aside. Martha entered, twisting her hands, eyes darting around the kitchen like she expected judgment to materialize from the walls. Sit, Jake said. Not unkind, but not warm either. Martha sat. Maggie and Jake remained standing. Judge Morrison arrives tomorrow, Martha began. He's already sent word. There's going to be a meeting. Town council. To discuss what to do about Miss Sullivan. What's there to discuss? Maggie asked bitterly. They already decided to hang me. That's why I'm here. Martha looked up and her eyes were red from crying. My husband. He was there. When Thomas Sullivan died, he was at the saloon with Thomas that night. The kitchen went still. Thomas was already sick, Martha continued. Had been for weeks. Yellow around the eyes, shaking hands. Everyone knew he was drinking himself to death, but no one said anything because Thomas bought rounds and told jokes and made everyone feel like they were his friend. That night he drank more than usual. My husband said he was talking crazy, saying he needed to go home and teach his wife a lesson. saying she'd been giving him sass, and he was going to beat it out of her. Maggie's hands clenched around the tea towel. My husband and 2 others carried him home, dropped him at your door. You answered, and Thomas, he hit you, right there on the porch. Backhanded you so hard you fell. My husband saw it. They all saw it. And then Thomas stumbled inside, and they left. Why are you telling me this? Maggie's voice shook. Because the next morning when they found Thomas dead, my husband told me what he'd seen. And I told him we had to tell someone. Tell the sheriff, tell the court. But he said no. Said Thomas Sullivan was a prominent man and you were nobody. Said speaking up would only cause trouble for us. Martha's tears spilled over. I was a coward. I let them blame you for something that wasn't your fault because I was too afraid to tell the truth. What changed? Jake asked. I saw her. Martha looked at Maggie. Saw her being dragged through the street. Saw the rope around her wrists. Saw her face. And I saw my daughter in her place. My little girl who's only 7. And I thought, what if someday she marries a man like Thomas? What if someday she needs help and no one speaks up? What kind of world am I leaving her if I stay silent now? Maggie sat down slowly. Your husband, will he testify? No, he's furious I came here, told me I was a fool, but I don't care anymore. Martha straightened her spine. I'll testify. I'll tell Judge Morrison and the whole town what I saw. I'll tell them Thomas Sullivan was a drunk who beat his wife and drank himself to death. And if they want to hang someone, they can hang me for staying quiet so long. Jake and Maggie exchanged glances. This changed things. Didn't fix everything, but it changed things. Thank you, Maggie said quietly. I don't deserve your thanks. No, Maggie agreed. You don't, but you're here now. That counts for something. Martha left with promises to return for the town meeting. When she was gone, Jake pulled out a chair and sat heavy. Well, he said. That's something. Is it enough? I don't know. Morrison's not a man who likes being wrong, and Eleanor Hayes has money. Money talks louder than one woman's conscience. Maggie stood paced to the window. Outside, the twins were playing chasing chickens, laughing. They didn't know what was coming. Didn't understand that tomorrow might tear their fragile new family apart before it ever really began. If Morrison demands I go back, Maggie said slowly, I'll go. Like hell you will. Jake. No. He stood cross to her. No, you're not sacrificing yourself to make this easier. I'm sacrificing myself to keep your daughters safe. They won't be safe if you're dead. Jake's voice rose. You think they won't blame themselves? Think they won't remember that they asked me to help you, and I did, and then I gave you up anyway. That'll destroy them worse than anything the town can do. Then what do you suggest? Maggie turned to face him. They were close now, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his brown eyes, close enough to feel the heat coming off him. You can't fight a whole town. You can't fight the law. Watch me. Jake. I mean it. His hands came up, gripped her shoulders. Gentle despite his anger. Sarah died, and I couldn't stop it. Couldn't save her. Couldn't do anything but watch her slip away. I've lived with that for 2 years. Lived with knowing I wasn't enough. His voice cracked. I'm not going through that again. I'm not losing someone else because I wasn't brave enough, strong enough, willing enough to fight. Maggie's breath caught. I'm not Sarah. I know, but you're... He stopped, seemed to struggle with the words. You're someone who matters. To the girls. To me. And I'll be damned if I let this town take that away. To me. The words hung between them, impossible and terrifying and precious. We should have met different, Maggie whispered. In a different town. Different lives. Maybe then we both would have been too scared to recognize what we needed. Jake's hands slid down her arms, fell away. Sometimes the worst circumstances bring the best things. Sarah taught me that. We met at her father's funeral. Worst day of her life. But she said later that grief broke her open enough to let love in. I'm not capable of, I don't know if I can. I'm not asking you to. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I'm just asking you to stay. To fight. To let me fight with you. Maggie looked at this man who'd saved her life, who'd opened his home, who'd seen her at her worst, and decided she was worth defending. This man who still loved his dead wife, but somehow had room in his heart for more. All right, she said. I'll stay. I'll fight. We'll fight, Jake corrected. We'll fight. Outside, Rose shrieked with laughter as Ruby chased her around the yard. Inside, two damaged people stood in a kitchen and promised each other the one thing they'd both learned not to trust. Hope. Tomorrow would bring Judge Morrison, would bring the town's reckoning, would bring whatever consequences came from defying the natural order of things. But tonight they had this moment, this fragile, impossible alliance. And for now, that was enough. Judge Morrison arrived at noon, his carriage kicking up dust that hung in the air like a threat. Maggie watched from the kitchen window, her hands frozen mid-motion over the bread dough she'd been kneading. The judge's arrival meant the reckoning had come 3 hours early. Jake appeared beside her, his presence solid and warm. Stay inside with the girls. No. Maggie. If he's here for me, hiding won't change anything. She wiped her hands on her apron, leaving flour streaks across the brown fabric. Besides, I'm tired of hiding. The carriage stopped in front of the house. Judge Morrison climbed out slowly, a portly man in his 60s with silver hair and the kind of face that looked permanently displeased. Behind him came Sheriff Dalton on horseback, and behind him, Maggie's stomach clenched, came Eleanor Hayes in her own buggy, Reverend Blackwood beside her. They brought an audience, Jake muttered. Rose appeared in the doorway, Ruby clutching her hand. Papa. Who are those people? Go to your room, Jake said. But, now, both of you, don't come out until I say. The twins looked at Maggie. She nodded. Go on. We'll be fine. They obeyed reluctantly, their footsteps heavy with worry, as they disappeared down the hallway. Maggie heard their door close, then silence. Jake opened the front door before anyone could knock, stepped out onto the porch. Maggie followed. Judge Morrison's eyebrows rose when he saw her. Mrs. Sullivan, you're looking remarkably well for a dead woman. I'm not dead yet, Your Honor. No, but you were sentenced to hang 3 days ago, which makes you a fugitive, and Mr. Thornton here, Morrison's eyes cut to Jake, is guilty of harboring a criminal. She's not a criminal, Jake said flatly. She's an innocent woman who survived a corrupt trial. Morrison's face darkened. You dare question my court? I question any court that convicts a woman based on gossip and prejudice instead of evidence. Eleanor stepped forward, her green dress rustling. She looked like she'd dressed for a party, not a confrontation. Oh, Jake, this is so beneath you. We all understand you're lonely, you miss Sarah, and this woman took advantage of that. But you must see reason. She's dangerous. The only danger she presents is to your ego, Eleanor. Eleanor's smile froze. I beg your pardon? You've been circling this ranch like a vulture since Sarah died, bringing pies I don't eat, wearing dresses I don't notice, making suggestions about how the girls need a mother, but only if that mother is you. Jake's voice was cold. You don't care about my daughters. You care about being Mrs. Thornton, about the status, about winning. How dare you? I dare because it's true. And when Maggie came along, when my girls actually connected with someone for the first time in 2 years, you couldn't stand it. So you stirred up the town, convinced Morrison to hold a trial that was more lynch mob than justice. All because you couldn't handle rejection. Eleanor's face went scarlet. She killed her husband. Thomas Sullivan killed himself, Maggie said quietly. All eyes turned to her. With whiskey and cruelty and years of self-destruction, I tried to save him, gave him herbs to ease the pain to help his liver. But nothing could save a man who didn't want to be saved. Lies. Reverend Blackwood spoke for the first time, his voice like gravel. You poisoned him with your dark remedies, witchcraft disguised as medicine. Chamomile isn't witchcraft, Reverend. It's a plant. Same as the plants in your garden. Same as the remedies your own mother probably used. My mother was a God-fearing woman who trusted in prayer, not potions. And when prayer didn't work, when someone got sick or hurt, what then? Did she let them suffer? Or did she use what God provided from the earth to help them heal? Blackwood's jaw worked. That's different. Why? Because your mother did it. Because she had your father's blessing and the town's approval. I'm a woman alone, a woman without protection. So when I do the same thing your mother did, it's witchcraft. It's evil. It's worth killing me over. Maggie took a step forward. The only difference between your mother and me, Reverend, is that she had a man to make her respectable. You're twisting scripture. I'm speaking truth. Maybe that's what frightens you. Maybe you're not angry about Thomas Sullivan at all. Maybe you're angry that I survived, that I didn't just roll over and die when the town decided I should. Reverend Blackwood's hand trembled. For a moment, Maggie thought he might strike her. Then his face crumpled. My daughter, he whispered. My Rebecca. She died because of a woman like you. A woman who claimed she could heal with herbs and prayers. Who took our money and our hope and gave us nothing but a dead child and empty promises. The anger drained out of Maggie. I'm sorry. Sorry. Blackwood's voice broke. Sorry doesn't bring her back. Sorry doesn't change the fact that I trusted someone I shouldn't have. That I let my wife convince me to try one more remedy when I should have. He stopped, pressed his fists against his eyes. I should have gotten a real doctor. Should have taken her to Cheyenne. Should have done something different. Or maybe she died because children die sometimes, Jake said quietly. Because medicine, any medicine, has limits. Because God or fate or whatever you want to call it doesn't always make sense. Don't you dare. My Sarah died with a real doctor in the room. Died with me holding her hand and praying harder than I've ever prayed. Died anyway. Was that my fault? Was it the doctor's fault? Or was it just... Jake's voice caught. Just something terrible that happened. Blackwood said nothing. Just stood there, shoulders shaking, a man who'd spent 2 years blaming the wrong person because the right person himself. Fate was too painful to face. Judge Morrison cleared his throat. This is all very touching, but it doesn't change the law. Mrs. Sullivan was convicted. She must return to custody to face her sentence. No, Jake said simply. Mr. Thornton, I can have you arrested for obstruction. Then arrest me, but you're not taking her. Sheriff Dalton shifted uncomfortably. Jake, don't make this harder than it needs to be. It's already hard, Bill. Question is whether you're going to make it harder by forcing me to do something we'll both regret. Dalton's hand drifted to his gun. Jake's did the same. The air crackled with the promise of violence. Stop! Martha Yates's voice rang out across the yard. She was running toward them, skirts hiked up, face flushed. Stop, all of you! You can't arrest her. She didn't do anything wrong. Morrison turned irritated. Mrs. Yates, this is not your concern. It is my concern. I saw what happened. I saw Thomas Sullivan the night he died. Martha skidded to a stop, breathing hard. My husband was there, at the saloon. Thomas was drinking. He'd been drinking for hours, and he was sick. Yellow skin, shaking hands, talking nonsense. Everyone could see he was dying, but no one said anything because Thomas bought the rounds. This is not evidence of, he hit her. Martha's shout echoed off the buildings. Thomas hit Maggie that night. My husband and 2 others carried him home, and Thomas backhanded her on the porch hard enough to knock her down. They saw it, all 3 of them. And then Thomas stumbled inside, and they left. Silence fell like a hammer. If there were witnesses, Morrison said slowly, why didn't they come forward during the trial? Because they were scared. Because Thomas Sullivan was liked and Maggie wasn't. Because speaking up meant admitting they'd watched a man beat his wife and done nothing. Martha's voice shook. I'm not scared anymore. I'll testify. I'll tell anyone who'll listen what really happened. Thomas Sullivan died because he destroyed his own body with years of drink, not because his wife tried to help him. Eleanor made a sound of disgust. This is absurd. One woman's testimony doesn't overturn a verdict. Maybe not, a new voice said. Doc Porter walked up from the road, his medical bag in hand. But a doctor's testimony might. Morrison straightened. Dr. Porter, what brings you here? Conscience mostly. Porter set his bag down. I examined Thomas Sullivan's body, wrote a report for the court. You remember what it said, Judge? That he'd been poisoned. That he had plant compounds in his system consistent with herbal remedies. But what I didn't say, what I was told not to say, was that Thomas Sullivan's liver was destroyed. Cirrhosis so advanced, I'm amazed he lasted as long as he did. The man was dying long before his wife gave him any medicine. Then why didn't you speak up? Jake demanded. Porter looked ashamed. Because Judge Morrison told me not to. Said the town needed closure. Said if we blamed the wife, people could move on. If we blamed the drink, we'd have to admit half the men in Ironwood Springs were killing themselves the same way. Morrison's face went purple. I never... You did, and I went along with it because I was tired, and I didn't want trouble. Porter looked at Maggie. I'm sorry. I let them use my report to condemn an innocent woman. That's not medicine. That's not justice. That's just cruelty. The foundation of Morrison's authority was cracking. Maggie could see it in his face, see him scrambling for control. Even if Mrs. Sullivan is innocent of murder, Morrison said tightly, she's still guilty of fleeing justice. She's still a fugitive. She didn't flee, Jake interrupted. I took her. Against her will, if you want to get technical. She was being dragged through the streets to hang. I cut her loose and brought her here. If anyone's guilty of anything, it's me. Then you'll both hang. The words hung in the air like an executioner's noose. Maggie felt Jake tense beside her, felt him preparing to fight, to shoot, to die if necessary. And she couldn't let that happen. No, she said, stepped forward. Judge Morrison, you want someone to blame, blame me. Say I seduced Jake Thornton. Say I bewitched him. Say whatever you need to say to save face. But he's got 2 little girls who've already lost one parent. Don't make them lose another. Maggie, don't. Jake grabbed her arm. She pulled away. It's done. I'm going with them. No, you're not. Jake. I said no. His voice cracked. I'm not letting you. I can't. He stopped, breathed hard. I can't lose someone else. Not like this. Not when I can stop it. You can't stop this. Watch me. He turned to Morrison. You want a trial? A real one this time, fine. But it's gonna be public. It's gonna be fair. And everyone in this town who lied, who covered up what Thomas Sullivan really was, they're gonna testify. Including you, Judge. Including everyone who knew Thomas beat his wife and said nothing. Morrison's eyes narrowed. You're not in a position to make demands, Thornton. Actually, I am. Because if you try to take Maggie, if you try to arrest her or hang her or hurt her in any way, I will tell every newspaper from here to Denver about this farce. About how a judge and a sheriff and a whole town conspired to murder an innocent woman to cover up their own guilt. About how a woman was convicted of killing a man who everyone knew was drinking himself to death. That's slander. That's truth. And you know what's interesting about truth? Judge, it spreads. It gets into places you can't control. It ruins reputations. Ends careers. Jake's smile was sharp. How do you think the territorial governor would feel knowing one of his judges railroaded an innocent woman to protect the town's secrets? Morrison's face cycled through fury, calculation, fear. He was cornered, and he knew it. "There's another option," Eleanor said suddenly. Everyone turned to her. She looked at Maggie with naked hatred. "A compromise. Mrs. Sullivan stays here, works for Mr. Thornton, but she's confined to the ranch. No going into town, no contact with decent people. She's quarantined. Until we can verify she's not a danger." "That's ridiculous," Jake started. "It's better than hanging," Eleanor cut in. "Better than a trial that might embarrass certain people. She stays here out of sight, and life goes on. Everyone wins." "Except Maggie," Jake said flatly. "She's alive, isn't she? That's more than she deserves." Maggie looked at Eleanor. At this woman who'd orchestrated so much pain out of jealousy and pride. "You want me trapped. Want to make sure I can't threaten your plans for Jake. That's what this is really about." Eleanor's smile was poison sweet. "I want everyone safe, dear. If that means you're restricted, well, that's a small price to pay. I won't live like a prisoner in someone else's home." "Then you'll die like a criminal in a grave." Eleanor's mask slipped, showing the rage underneath. "Choose, Mrs. Sullivan. Life or death. Freedom or safety. You can't have both." The choice wasn't really a choice. Maggie knew it. Jake knew it. The whole damn assembly knew it. But before Maggie could answer, before she could surrender what little freedom she had left, a small voice cut through the tension. "Leave our mama alone." Rose stood on the porch, Ruby beside her. They'd disobeyed Jake's order to stay inside. They'd heard everything. "Girls, get back," Jake started. "No!" Rose marched down the steps, her little face set with fury. "You're all being mean. Maggie's nice. She makes us bread and tells us stories and tucks us in. She's not dangerous. You're the dangerous ones." Ruby nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Why do you want to hurt her? Why do you want to take her away? She's ours." Eleanor's expression softened into something like pity. "Oh, you poor confused children. She's not your mother. Your mother is dead. This woman is just—" "She's more our mother than you'll ever be," Rose shouted. "And we love her, and Papa loves her too. We know he does. So you can't have him, and you can't hurt Maggie." The words fell like stones. Jake's face went pale. Maggie couldn't breathe. Eleanor looked like she'd been slapped. "You don't know what you're saying," Eleanor said, but her voice shook. "Yes, I do. Mama told me before she died. She said—" Rose's voice broke. "She said Papa might find someone new someday. Someone to love again. Someone to help take care of us. And she said that was okay. That she wanted us to be happy. That love doesn't die just because people do." Ruby grabbed Maggie's hand. "Mama would like you. We know she would. Please don't go." Maggie looked down at these two small girls who'd saved her life in more ways than one, who'd given her a reason to fight when she'd forgotten she had any fight left. She knelt, ignoring the pain in her ribs, and took both their hands. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. "I promise." "You can't promise that," Morrison said. The law failed," Jake interrupted. "Failed these girls, failed Maggie, failed everyone who's ever needed justice and got cruelty instead." He moved to stand beside Maggie, beside his daughters, presenting a united front. "So here's what's going to happen. Maggie stays. No restrictions, no quarantine, no conditions. She's part of this family now. And if anyone has a problem with that, they can take it up with me." Sheriff Dalton sighed. "Jake, I can't just—" "Yes, you can. You're the law in this town, not Morrison, not Eleanor, not the gossips and the cowards. You. So tell me, Bill, what's it gonna be? You gonna do your job and protect an innocent woman, or you gonna be another person she has to survive?" Dalton looked at Maggie, at the twins, at Jake, long and hard. Finally, he turned to Judge Morrison. "Far as I can see, there's reasonable doubt about Mrs. Sullivan's guilt. Enough for a retrial anyway. And until that happens, she's innocent until proven guilty. That's the law, Judge. Even you can't change that." Morrison sputtered. "This is outrageous. "This is finished," Dalton said. "Mrs. Sullivan stays with the Thorntons. Anyone who wants to challenge that can file a formal complaint. Until then, she's under my protection." He looked at Eleanor. "Ma'am, I think it's time you went home." Eleanor's composure shattered. "You're all fools. She's going to destroy this family, corrupt those innocent children, and when she does, when something terrible happens, it'll be on your heads." "Nothing terrible's gonna happen," Rose said. "Except to you. You're gonna be lonely and mean for the rest of your life." Out of the mouths of babes, Maggie thought. Eleanor's face went white, then red, then white again. She climbed into her buggy, without another word snapped the reins hard enough to make the horse jump, and left in a cloud of dust and wounded pride. Reverend Blackwood watched her go, then looked at Maggie. "I was wrong," he said quietly. "I blamed you for Rebecca when I should have blamed God, or myself, or no one." He paused. "I'm not ready to forgive you for something you didn't do, but I'm ready to stop hating you. Maybe that's a start." He left too, walking slow like a man carrying weights. Doc Porter tipped his hat. "If you need medical attention, Mrs. Sullivan, you come see me. No charge. Consider it payment for my silence when I should have spoken." "Thank you, Doctor." He followed the Reverend, leaving just Morrison, Dalton, Jake, Maggie, and the twins. Morrison straightened his coat. "This isn't over, Thornton. I'll be watching. One misstep, one complaint, and I'll have enough cause to arrest her properly." "There won't be any complaints," Jake said, "because there won't be any problems. Right, Bill?" Dalton nodded. "Right. Now come on, Judge. Let these folks be." They left. The sound of hoofbeats and wagon wheels faded. Silence settled over the ranch like dust after a storm. Rose and Ruby were wrapped around Maggie, like vines, holding on, like they were afraid she'd disappear. Jake stood close, his hand on Ruby's head, his eyes on Maggie's face. "That was stupid," Maggie said. "You could have been arrested. You could have—" "I told you," Jake interrupted. "I'm done watching wrong things happen. Done being careful when I should be brave." "Your daughters said what needed saying." He looked at Rose, at Ruby. "You two were supposed to stay in your room." "We heard fighting," Rose said, unrepentant. "We couldn't let them take Maggie." "You should have let me handle it." "You were handling it. We helped." Jake's mouth twitched. "That you did." Ruby looked up at Maggie. "You really promise you're really staying?" "I promise. Forever." Maggie looked at Jake. He looked back, and in his eyes she saw the same question, the same hope, the same terror of wanting something that seemed impossible. "As long as you'll have me," Maggie said. "Forever then," Rosa declared. "Because we're never letting you go." They went inside together, all four of them, and closed the door on the judgment of the world. Jake made coffee. Maggie cut bread. The twins chattered about everything and nothing, filling the kitchen with noise and life. And for the first time since Thomas Sullivan had put his hands on her in anger, Maggie let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she had a future that didn't end in violence or despair. Maybe she had a home. 3 weeks passed before the town tested them again. 3 weeks of Maggie waking to birdsong instead of shouting, of cooking meals that people actually wanted to eat, of watching Rose and Ruby grow braver, louder, more certain that the world wouldn't take this away from them. 3 weeks of working beside Jake in comfortable silence, of hands brushing when they passed tools, of conversations that started about nothing and ended with both of them understanding a little more about survival, about loss, about the strange alchemy of turning pain into something livable. The ranch thrived under Maggie's care. The garden exploded with late summer vegetables. The chickens laid more eggs than they'd seen in months. Even the old milk cow seemed to produce better, as if Maggie's steady hands communicated safety down to the animals. But the town didn't forget, couldn't forget. 3 weeks wasn't enough time for shame to transform into acceptance. It started with small things. Supplies that Jake ordered from the mercantile arrived late, or incomplete, or damaged. The blacksmith suddenly had no time to shoe their horses. The feed store was always just out of the grain Jake needed, though everyone could see the bag stacked high in the back. Jake bore it without complaint. Paid cash. Waited when he had to. Went to the next town over when Ironwood Springs refused to serve him. "They'll get tired of it," he told Maggie one evening as they sat on the porch watching the twins chase fireflies. "Eventually, being cruel takes more energy than just letting things be. Or they'll escalate," Maggie said. "People don't like being proven wrong. Makes them mean." She was right. On a Tuesday morning, Jake rode into town for nails. He'd been working on repairs to the barn, and the summer storms had done more damage than he'd realized. He left Maggie with the girls, promising to be back by noon. He was back by 10, his jaw set, his knuckles bloody. Maggie met him at the door. "What happened?" "Someone put a sign outside the mercantile. Said, 'No service to murderers or those who harbor them.'" Jake dismounted, wincing. "I took it down. Store owner objected, loudly." "Jake." "I'm fine. He's got a broken nose. I've got skinned knuckles. We're even." "You can't keep fighting the whole town. Watch me." But Maggie saw the exhaustion in his eyes. Saw how his shoulders bowed under the weight of being the only one standing between her and the world's judgment. He was strong, but even strong men had limits. That night, after the twins were asleep, Maggie found Jake in the barn. He was supposed to be checking on the horses, but he was just standing there staring at nothing, his hands braced against a stall door. "You're going to break," Maggie said quietly. Jake didn't turn. "I'm fine." "You're exhausted. You're fighting everyone. For me. And I—" Her voice caught. "I don't know if I'm worth this." "Don't." Jake turned, then his eyes fierce. "Don't do that. Don't question your worth because other people are too blind to see it." "They're not blind. They're realistic. I'm a burden." "You're not a burden. You're—" He stopped, seemed to struggle with the words. "You're the first thing that's felt right since Sarah died. The girls are happy. Really happy, not just pretending, and I—" He moved closer, close enough that Maggie could smell leather and sweat and something underneath that was just him. "I haven't felt this alive in 2 years. Haven't wanted to wake up in the morning. Haven't cared about anything except making it through another day. And then you came, and suddenly there's a reason. Suddenly, there's more than just survival." "Jake, I'm not asking you to love me. I know it's too soon. Might always be too soon. But I need you to know you matter. To me. To the girls. To this ranch. You matter, and I'll keep fighting anyone who says different." Maggie's eyes burned. "What if the fight never ends?" "Then it never ends. But at least I'll be fighting for something worth it." He was so close. Close enough to touch. Close enough to lean into. Close enough to let herself imagine what it might feel like to be held by someone who didn't want to hurt her. But before she could move, before she could make the terrifying choice to reach for him, Rose's scream shattered the night. They ran. Both of them sprinting across the yard through the door down the hallway to the twins' room. Rose was sitting up in bed, sobbing. Ruby was trying to comfort her, but tears streamed down her own face, too. "What's wrong?" Jake dropped to his knees beside Rose's bed. "What happened?" "I had a dream," Rose choked out. "A bad dream. They came and took Maggie. And you tried to stop them, but there were too many, and they... She couldn't finish. Just buried her face against Jake's chest and wept. Ruby crawled to Maggie, wrapped her arms around Maggie's waist. "Don't let them take you. Please don't let them." "I won't," Maggie whispered. "I promise." "You can't promise that," Rose sobbed. "Mama promised she'd be okay and then she died. You can't promise." The room went silent, except for Rose's crying. Jake held her rocking slightly, his face carved from stone. Maggie held Ruby, feeling the little girl's heart racing against her ribs. "You're right," Maggie said finally. "I can't promise I'll never leave. None of us can. Your mama couldn't. I can't. Your papa can't. Bad things happen, and we don't always have control." She waited until Rose looked at her. "But I can promise I'll fight. I can promise I won't go easy. And I can promise that every single day I'm here, I'll love you both with everything I have." "You love us." Ruby's voice was small. "More than I knew I could love anything." Rose pulled away from Jake, crawled across the bed to Maggie. "Really? Really? Even though we're not yours, even though our real mama was someone else." Maggie's throat closed. "Honey, love doesn't work like that. Love isn't limited. Your mama loved you, still loves you wherever she is. And I love you too. Both things can be true. You don't have to choose." Rose looked at her father. "Is that true, Papa? Can we love Mama and Maggie both?" Jake's voice was rough. "Yes. Love doesn't run out. It just grows. Makes more room." Rose considered this, then nodded. Curled up against Maggie Rose on one side, Ruby on the other, two small bodies, seeking comfort. Jake sat on the edge of the bed, his hand on Maggie's shoulder, and together they stayed there until the twins fell back asleep. When they finally crept out, closing the door softly, Jake caught Maggie's hand in the hallway. "You meant it," he said. "Not a question. I meant it." "When did you know?" Maggie thought about it. "The first night. When Ruby called me Mommy without thinking. When something inside me that had been dead for years woke up and decided to live again." Jake's thumb traced circles on her palm. "Sarah would have loved you. Would have been grateful her girls found someone who could love them like this." "I'm not trying to replace her." "I know. That's why it works." He lifted her hand, pressed it briefly to his chest, over his heart. "She's still here. Will always be here. But there's room for you too, if you want there to be." Maggie felt his heartbeat steady and strong under her palm. "I want there to be." They stood there in the darkened hallway, holding hands like shy children, neither quite ready to name what was growing between them, but both willing to let it grow. The next morning, everything changed. They were finishing breakfast when riders appeared on the horizon. Not one or two, but a dozen, maybe more, coming fast. Jake was on his feet instantly. "Girls, go to your room. Lock the door. Don't come out no matter what you hear." "Papa," Rose started. "Now." They ran. Jake grabbed his rifle from over the door. Maggie reached for the shotgun Jake kept in the kitchen, checked that it was loaded. "You know how to use that?" Jake asked. "Thomas taught me. Said a wife should be able to defend the house while her husband was gone." She met his eyes. "Never thought I'd be defending it from the town itself." The riders circled the house, not attacking, not yet just surrounding, making a statement. Judge Morrison sat on a fine black horse at the front, Sheriff Dalton beside him. Behind them, Maggie recognized faces. Store owners, ranchers, men who'd watched her dragging and said nothing. And Eleanor Hayes dressed like she was attending a social, a satisfied smile on her face. Jake stepped onto the porch. "You're trespassing." "We're here on official business," Morrison announced. "Several complaints have been filed regarding Mrs. Sullivan, disturbance of the peace, corruption of minors, practicing medicine without a license." "That's horseshit and you know it." "Language, Mr. Thornton. There are ladies present." Morrison's smile was thin. "Nevertheless, these are serious charges. Mrs. Sullivan must answer them. In town, before the council." "She's not going anywhere." "Then we'll take her by force." Morrison gestured, and 3 men dismounted, started toward the porch. Jake raised the rifle. "Take another step and see what happens." They stopped. But Maggie saw more men moving to flank the house. Saw the calculation in Morrison's eyes. He'd brought enough men that Jake couldn't fight them all. Couldn't protect both Maggie and the house where his daughters hid. Morrison knew it. Jake knew it. And Maggie knew what she had to do. "I'll go," she said. "No." Jake, look around. There's too many. If you fight, people will die. Maybe you. Maybe them. Maybe... She couldn't say it. Couldn't voice the fear that a stray bullet might find its way to the bedroom where Rose and Ruby hid. I'll go. I'll answer their charges, and when they realize they have nothing, I'll come home. They're not gonna let you come home. This is a trap. I know. Maggie set down the shotgun. But it's a trap that only catches me, not you, not the girls. She stepped off the porch before Jake could stop her. Walked toward the mounted men, her hands open, her head high. She would not be dragged this time, would not give them that satisfaction. Eleanor's smile widened. How noble! The murderess surrenders. I'm not surrendering, Maggie said clearly. I'm choosing. There's a difference. Sheriff Dalton dismounted, pulled out rope. Jake made a sound of protest, but Maggie shook her head. It's all right. It's not all right. It's not... Jake's voice broke. Maggie, please, don't do this. She looked at him. At this man who'd saved her life, who'd given her a home, who'd shown her that not all men were like Thomas Sullivan. Take care of the girls. Tell them I love them. Tell them... Her voice caught. Tell them I'll come back if I can. When you come back, Jake corrected fiercely. When, not if. Dalton tied her wrists gentle as he could manage, but rope was rope. It cut. It burned. Maggie bore it without flinching. They lifted her onto a horse, led her away from the ranch. Away from Jake standing frozen on the porch. Away from the house where two little girls would wake from their hiding place to find Maggie gone. Away from the closest thing to family she'd ever known. The ride to town was silent. Maggie didn't fight, didn't argue, didn't beg. She sat straight-backed and quiet, saving her energy for whatever came next. They took her to the church. Not the jail, the church. Morrison wanted this to look official. Wanted the blessing of God, or the appearance of it anyway. The town packed the pews. Everyone who'd watched her dragging 3 weeks ago was here to watch her judgment now. The only difference was the venue. And the fact that this time she walked in on her own 2 feet. They sat her in a chair at the front. Morrison stood at the pulpit like he was the reverend. Maybe he was in his own mind. Reverend and judge and executioner all rolled into one. Mrs. Sullivan. Morrison began. You stand accused of multiple offenses against this town and its citizens. How do you plead? To what exactly? You haven't told me what I'm accused of. Just vague charges that could mean anything. Disturbance of the peace. I've been on Jake Thornton's ranch for 3 weeks. Haven't set foot in town. How did I disturb anyone's peace? Morrison's jaw tightened. Your very presence disturbs the peace. You're a convicted murderess. A conviction based on false testimony and corrupt proceedings. We've been over this. You're corrupting innocent children. I'm teaching them to read, to cook, to garden. If that's corruption, then every mother in this town is guilty. You're practicing medicine without a license. I made herbal tea, chamomile and mint. If that's illegal, you better arrest everyone who's ever made their children feel better with folk remedies. Morrison was turning red. You're being deliberately difficult. I'm defending myself. That is my right. Or have you decided that women don't get rights in your courtroom? The crowd murmured. Morrison sensed he was losing control. Enough. This isn't a trial. It's a hearing, and I've heard enough. The council has voted. You're to be removed from Ironwood Springs permanently, banned from town limits. If you return, you'll be arrested and your sentence, the original sentence of hanging, will be carried out immediately. Maggie's stomach dropped. You can't do that. I just did. Sheriff Dalton will escort you to the county line. Where you go from there is your concern. But you're not welcome here. What about my things? What about... She stopped. She had no things. Everything she owned, she'd borrowed from Sarah Thornton's closet. What about the Thorntons? Mr. Thornton will be informed that harboring you is illegal. If he attempts to see you, help you, or communicate with you in any way, he'll face charges of his own. Morrison's smile was cruel. You wanted to protect his family. Mrs. Sullivan, congratulations. You get to do it by leaving them alone forever." The room spun. Maggie had expected many things. Jail, another trial, maybe even hanging. But this exile, permanent separation from the people she'd only just learned to love. "You're a coward," she said. "All of you. You know I'm innocent. You know Thomas Sullivan beat me and drank himself to death. But admitting that means admitting you all stood by and let it happen. So instead, you exile me. Make me the villain so you don't have to be." No one spoke. No one argued. Because she was right, and they knew it. Sheriff Dalton touched her arm. "Come on. Let's get this over with." They put her on a horse again. Rode through town one last time. People watched from windows, from doorways, their faces a mixture of triumph and shame. At the town limits, Dalton untied her hands. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "for what it's worth." "It's worth nothing." Maggie rubbed her wrists. "You could have stopped this." "I know, but I didn't, and I'll have to live with that." He handed her a canteen and a small pouch. "There's some money in there, food. Not much, but it'll get you a few towns over. After that, you're on your own." "I've always been on my own." Dalton flinched. "Jake Thornton's gonna come after you." "Tell him not to. Tell him—" Maggie's voice broke. "Tell him his daughters need him more than I do. Tell him to let me go." "He won't listen." "Make him listen." Dalton nodded, mounted his horse. "For what it's worth, Mrs. Sullivan, I think you would have been good for him. For those girls. I think you could have been happy here. We'll never know now, will we?" He rode away, leaving Maggie standing at the edge of everything she'd briefly, impossibly been allowed to want. She walked, one foot in front of the other, away from Ironwood Springs, away from Jake, away from Rose and Ruby, and the life she'd been foolish enough to imagine might be hers. The sun beat down. Her feet blistered in Sarah's old boots. The canteen ran dry before sunset. But Maggie kept walking because there was nothing else to do. When night fell, she found a cluster of rocks and curled up between them, trying to stay warm. Trying not to think about Rose and Ruby waking up asking for her, crying when they learned she was gone. Trying not to think about Jake's face when Dalton told him. The way his jaw would set. The way he'd want to fight and wouldn't be able to because fighting meant leaving his daughters alone. Trying not to think about how she'd almost let herself believe in happy endings. She must have dozed because she woke to the sound of hoofbeats. Maggie scrambled up, heart racing. Had Morrison sent someone to make sure she kept moving? Or worse, to finish what the town had started? But the figure that emerged from the darkness wasn't a stranger. It was Jake. He dismounted in one smooth motion, strode toward her. "You're a damn fool." "Jake, did you really think I'd let you go? Did you think I'd just accept the town's decree and move on like you meant nothing? Your daughters are with Martha Yates. She's watching them until I get back. And I told them I was going to bring you home." Maggie shook her head. "You can't. Morrison said, Morrison can go to hell. I'm not interested in what he said." Jake grabbed her shoulders. "I'm interested in what you want. Do you want to leave? Do you want to keep running? No, but then don't. Come home. Fight with me. Let me fight for you. Let those girls who love you know that sometimes when the world says no, you get to say yes anyway. They'll arrest you. Let them try. They'll take the ranch. Then we'll go somewhere else. Start over. But we do it together." "Jake, you're not thinking." "I am thinking. I'm thinking about Sarah telling me before she died that she didn't want me to stop living. Didn't want the girls growing up in a house full of grief. I'm thinking about Rose and Ruby calling you Mama. And meaning it. I'm thinking about how the first time in 2 years I went to bed and didn't dream about death." His hands tightened on her shoulders. "I'm thinking that I found something I thought I'd never have again, and I'm not letting it go without a fight. I'm not Sarah." "I know. I don't want you to be. I want you to be you. Maggie Sullivan, who survived everything the world threw at her and came out fighting. Who taught me that it's okay to want more than just survival. Who made my daughters smile again. His voice dropped. Who made me want to smile again. Maggie felt something crack open in her chest. The last wall, the final defense. I'm scared. So am I, terrified. But I'm more scared of letting you walk away, of spending the rest of my life wondering what if. What if it doesn't work? What if the town wins? What if we lose everything trying to fight them? Then we lose everything, but at least we tried. At least we didn't give up just because someone told us we should. Jake's hands moved from her shoulders to cup her face. Maggie, come home. Please. She looked at this man who'd saved her twice now, once from the rope, once from giving up. This man who stood in the darkness and asked her to be brave one more time. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll come home. Jake pulled her into his arms, held her so tight she couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only feel safe in a way she'd never felt safe before. Thank God. Thank God. They rode through the night, two people on one horse heading back toward a town that didn't want them and a fight that wasn't over. But this time, Maggie wasn't being dragged. This time, she was choosing. Choosing to fight. Choosing to love. Choosing to believe that sometimes the world got it wrong and you had to prove them wrong by living anyway. They reached the ranch at dawn. Rose and Ruby were waiting on the porch with Martha, and when they saw Maggie, they ran so fast they nearly fell. Maggie caught them, sank to her knees, and held them while they cried and laughed and told her they knew Papa would bring her back. They knew it. Martha smiled. Town's gonna be furious. Town's already furious, Jake said. What's a little more? They'll come for her again. Let them come. And they did come. 3 days later, a dozen men led by Morrison ready to enforce the exile. But this time, Jake wasn't alone. Doc Porter stood on the porch beside him. Martha and her husband. The blacksmith who'd finally grown a conscience. A handful of others who'd decided that exile was a step too far. Not enough to turn the tide, but enough to make Morrison pause. She stays, Jake said. You want her gone, you're gonna have to go through all of us. Morrison looked at the assembled group. Looked at the rifles, the grim faces, the line in the sand. This isn't over, he said finally. No, Jake agreed. But it's over for today. They left, and they kept leaving. Week after week, Morrison tried different tactics. Legal threats, economic pressure, public shaming. But Jake held firm. The ranch suffered. Money got tight. Friends became scarce. But the girls thrived. And Maggie stayed. 6 months later in the spring, Jake asked her to marry him properly. Not out of obligation or convenience, but because somewhere between fighting the town and raising the girls, they'd fallen into something that looked like love. Maggie said yes. They married quietly, Martha as witnessed the twins as flower girls. Reverend Blackwood refused to perform the ceremony. So Doc Porter did it instead, stumbling through vows he'd pulled from a book, but meaning every word. Judge Morrison tried to block the marriage license, failed. Tried to have it annulled, failed again. Because some people are stronger than corrupt judges and cruel towns. A year after that, Ironwood Springs got a new judge. Morrison was removed for corruption, his schemes finally catching up to him. The new judge reviewed Maggie's case, found it baseless, and officially cleared her name. Eleanor Hayes moved to Denver chasing a congressman she'd set her sights on. The town slowly forgot why they'd hated Maggie in the first place. But Maggie never forgot the dragging, never forgot the women who'd laughed and the men who'd cheered, never forgot Judge Morrison's smile as he sentenced her to hang. She didn't forgive them, didn't need to. She just built a life good enough that their cruelty became irrelevant. Rose and Ruby grew into young women who knew their worth, who'd learned from watching their father and Maggie that sometimes the right thing is also the hard thing, and you do it anyway. Jake's hair went gray at the temples. The ranch prospered, and sometimes on quiet evenings, he'd pull Maggie close and tell her he was grateful. Grateful she'd survived. Grateful he'd been brave enough to cut those ropes. Grateful for second chances. And Maggie, who'd been dragged through dust and left for dead, who'd survived a husband's fists and a town's hatred, who'd learned the hard way that survival wasn't living until she met a cowboy, and his twins, Maggie, would smile and say she was grateful too. Because she'd been given something precious, a family born not from blood, but from choice, not from duty, but from love, not from what the world said should be, but from what they decided would be. And that was worth every fight, every tear, every moment of terror. That was worth surviving for.